Hello everyone, I wanted to go over a few things regarding our studio and just kind of show you how this works. So once you have everything set for R Markdown, we can create a new R Markdown file. We want it to be HTML, so we're just going to leave that the way it is. And then it will populate for us the file and then some like generic text. This is how you denote a header. So this would be a level 1 header. This would be a level 2 header, this would be a level 3 header, etc. But we don't need any of this here. So we could start our document. You can answer questions in your HTML file by just typing like this as plain text. And then when you actually want to do your R code, we create an R chunk. I like to name my R chunks. And we're going to have echo set to true. It's done up here at the top line, so we don't need to do anything. If for some reason when we compiled this, we didn't want it to show the code, then and just show that our output, then we would, like if we were writing a report, for example, then we would say set echo equal to false. So there are several things you can do up in here just by calling different arguments, but for the simplicity of just getting used to this, we're just going to leave this the way it is. And the naming of chunks, what that does is down here you can see I have my chunk 1 called setup and my chunk 2 called libraries. If my document is really long, it helps me to skip back and forth between chunks if I have them named accordingly. So first, let's just check our working directory really quick. And I'm pretty sure if you just want to execute a single line, you can hit Control Enter, and then you can see down here in the console that it's running the code. So it ran it. It told me that my working directory is users under my name and then documents. And if you type down here, it will not save it. You can actually type R down here as if it were like a terminal window, but your script needs to be written up here. This is what's going to get saved. Okay, so if I needed to set a different working directory, I could do that, but I actually don't need to, but it would look like this. And I could go about my business. I usually group my chunks by the functionality of the code chunk that I'm writing. So for my first chunk, I almost always call all of my libraries. So let's say that we need ggplot2 and I don't have it. There's two ways I can install the package. Generally, I don't put install packages as part of my code that I'm saving and sharing because it can mess up the compiling when you go to knit this file into an R Markdown file, and it's just kind of bad practice. So I'm gonna install my packages down here. This way it's not a part of my code, but I have to install a package before I can use it. So so we'll go ahead and do that. Oh, actually, I am, there we go. Okay, so I already have ggplot2 installed, so I'm actually going to cancel out of this, but that's how I would install it. And then before I can use ggplot2, I have to call it in my library. So I like to keep all my libraries up here. So this is where I would call, let's say I also wanted my Amelia library. I would put all my libraries up here. If I'm coding later and then I realize I need another package that I don't have, I can install it down here in the console, and then I could go and go back to my libraries chunk and then just add it to my running list of libraries. I also find this, it makes it easier to cite if you are writing like a research paper or something with R Markdown, but we won't be doing that in this class, but it kind of makes things cleaner. So it also helps if somebody else is trying to replicate your code to see all of the packages that they're going to need so they can install them if they don't have them. Okay, a couple other things about this. So, well, let's go ahead and do something that's going to print out, because that's not going to be very interesting for us. I'm just writing something. Okay, just for when we go to compile this and knit it into an R Markdown HTML file, it'll be a little more interesting. We can test our code. We can either compile by the entire chunk, or you can run it line by line. So then you hit Control Enter, and then, okay, great, it saved it. I can see down here in the console the results of my code, and then everything worked the way I wanted it to. Or if I'm done with my chunk and I want to just test the whole chunk all at once, I can do that, and it will go through and run the code, and I can check it down here. Over here in my environment, I can see all of my variables and their values. I can see any data sets I have or any functions that I've written. And then over here over here, I can see, like, I can pull up files, or I can see what packages I have. This is another way to install a package. You can search for them here and then click install. And then the viewer or the plots will show you if you generate any plots, a preview over here. Although I find the previews actually pop up down here when I'm using R Markdown files, but if you're just using an R script, then they'll come out over here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I just hit Control S, and I'm just going to call it test. And now it's saved as an R Markdown file. You can see this extension here, .rmd. And then I can knit this file to make my HTML file. So when I do that, it's going to think for a minute down here. If there's any errors when I try to render, they'll show up now, but it looks fine. And then in my viewer, it's showing me a preview of my file, which I can pop out by clicking right there. And everything looks exactly how I want it to. You can see my plain text showing up right here, and then my code chunks right here. And then my output from this code chunk was 7, which is what we expected. And then my HTML file will be saved in the same folder as my RMD file. So make sure when you're uploading your files that you're careful about which file you choose, because they'll have the same name but different extensions. So make sure you choose the HTML file to submit. Some other things that you might interest you about this: if you go to Global Options, you can change the way your console looks. I like to have mine in dark mode, but you can see there's lots of options and themes that you can choose from. And then you can change some of the functionality of R Markdown if you don't want certain things to show in line. Or you'd rather have like your image or equations, the showing in line is what they were doing on mine. If you don't want those to appear, you can click never, which is fine because you're already getting feedback in the console, so you don't also need the pop-ups. So if you find that annoying, that's one thing that you can change. So this is where all your settings are in RStudio. And then I think for now that's it. That's all I want to do for an introduction. I will also say, if you're having trouble loading a file for some reason, you can try loading it through over here by clicking down here and this, and then picking, if it's from Excel or if it's from a CSV file, you would do it from text. If your environment's really messy, or you've done like a lot of manipulating of a data set and you just want to start over, you can remove all the objects from your environment, but then you have to reload everything. So if you loaded a data set, you need to reload it again before you continue with testing your other code. And if you want to clear down here, because you just want a clean slate, you can click the little broom down here as well. So that's how we do our files. That's kind of the introduction to RStudio, where everything is. Make sure your script is up here and you're using this just to see the outputs after you run your chunks. I'll also show you another way to run your chunks really quick. You can click up here and run the selected line, the current chunk, or you can run everything, your entire file, all of the chunks all at once. So that's another way to compile and run your code.